Are there any other, I guess, wins from the technology perspective that have come out of all this that you guys are seeing on the horizon that are coming up that are going to help? And then I guess kind of connecting the dots, like should, when you're trying to get funding, should we be trying to insert, hey, we're going to do this technology. It's new, it's better, it's faster. Please fund me.
Well, I can definitely speak to the material changes that we've seen, the advancements in microduct technology and the way our networks are now being deployed is significantly better for the overall longevity of the network, future-proofing, weather considerations that have been coming. Climate change is becoming a more and more considerate factor when it comes to our deployments. Break fix, maintenance are huge elements when it comes to what we're doing, especially when you're picking a market or you're trying to develop in a particular area, going off of the existing infrastructure versus designing brand new. The one thing I can definitely say from what I call the old days back when we were building, Kansas City to what we're doing now, it blows my mind how much better our technology is and our materials and our capabilities of getting in the ground once, but still being able to utilize extra conduit and extra facilities for future options and future technologies, things that we could never predict in the past. We have a lot more opportunities now to build on and increase that ability. And that's really made a difference as well. We're not just building for the next 10 years, we're really building for the next 20 and 30 years. And I do see that as being a significant change as these different municipalities, small towns, larger towns, they really start to understand that this is bigger than just a brand new cable in the ground. This is a brand new system that's going to enhance a lot of what we want to put off in the long-term future for us.
I think it's interesting to Dirk's earlier comment that, which is not talked about a lot, that the build of this is not a 1 year, 2 year. It is a 5, 10 year, like it's a longer term view, which I think, again, we're a very soundbite type of people and it's hard to think that far out, but that's an interesting point. Building for the future.
Well, and I do think a lot of people that are putting in for the grants have recognized that. And they're putting in, we're also enabling 5G. There's a few people, probably not a lot right now, but they're also enabling IoT, whatever IoT really turns into, because IoT has become this catch-all for the smart things that we all use, whether it be in our house, whether it be smart city stuff. It all becomes this catch-all for what is IoT. And I know at Bonfire, we've been doing some research with, what is IoT going to be? What's it going to mean for us? But I think what we've got to be able to do is try to plan for that as much as you can, whether that be building an excess capacity and all those things. Because that's something that you're starting to see in a few of the older communities with fiber to the home. And I say older, like Kansas City, as much as it's a new network, it's one of the older ones. You take Chattanooga, Tennessee, you take Lafayette, Louisiana, who's had their networks for 10 years now, or almost 10 years. You start to look at it. And one conversation that we were having 10 years ago was, okay, we're going to empower people to consume more. And it's all, I think everybody has accepted that at least has had this conversation that the first thing you do when you build a broadband network is you empower somebody to consume more content. You're watching more videos online, you're streaming more videos, you're doing more things. But what is going to be interesting is the long-term impacts. And what the long-term impacts are going to be is, what else can we do to become producers and not just consumers? Fiber to the home is going to be able to, it's going to push us there to what can you do now that you have the bandwidth, not just that you got a gigabit down, but you got a gigabit up. What if you're streaming more things? So you start to see that. That's the whole evolution of what the technology is going to take us to. And we have to be able to see that. And I don't know that it's, I don't know how many studies are even been done on it, but when you start to consider what happens after we've just created the consumers and we start to create producers in these markets, what does that do for the economy? What does it do for the tax base? I mean, we can start to see some of those things now with, hey, Google and some of the other Silicon Valley companies recognize, hey, their workforce can be remote. There's plenty of people that love to live in the middle of Wyoming, but they don't have the bandwidth to work for their company that's in Silicon Valley. that can do that now. So you're starting to see a little bit of that happen, but we're on the very front edge of that. And I really think that's going to push things a lot further. And I think it's actually going to be really good for rural America of all places.
I think the other piece of that is, into the IoT piece, is we have an aging population, right? So there's a lot of people that are, in retirement age, and the ability to stay in their homes, right? Having technology that has allow you to age in place, so to speak, right? Not have to, be able to be monitored remotely. To your point, Duke, I want to live somewhere out that's not in a big city, but I need to be able to be monitored by my family or my children or whatever. Like the tech, you need broadband, you need access to do that kind of stuff. So
I would say in that absolutely agencies want to fund this kind of thing. I mean, you look at what the requirements are on a lot of these grants. It's how are you future proofing? Like, what are you thinking about for the future? And what are you thinking about for the climate, right? How are you going to account for global heating? So I don't think that would stop any funding agency from funding an application, especially if you're proposing something new, right? If they're saying, yeah, this is going to be a great investment because, here's what they're saying it can do. Here's some backup evidence that they have,
So how much pie in the sky should they be there? Like, is it a good idea from a grant perspective to try to be very future forward and like, hey, I can do all these things with IoT? Does that help?
I think you have to be practical about it, right? And you have to both think
not the
future.
Jetsons so much.
You have to think for the future and address the current need, right? You can't just say we're building for something that is whatever IoT might be, and not address like, hey, this aging population needs telehealth right now, right? So again, that's kind of where grant writing comes in: is how are you phrasing your project? How are you presenting it? How are you thinking it through? And then
a lot of this is building the infrastructure for that, though. A lot of it is, because even though we may not be talking about or installing all of the IoT devices, the simple fact of the matter is until there's infrastructure in place to support that, we can't even really, you can't deploy any of that stuff. So the bulk of the cost in all of these is building the infrastructure. So you've got to equate this back to, the electrification of America back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. It's the same thing. We're going through it again. And even when even when the phone companies were originally put in the old telephone lines, it's the same thing. We're going through it again. It's just a technology that has to be installed.
Yeah, I think what we see as kind of one of the big concerns is kind of what Alex was saying, though, with how resilient is this going to be? How are you accounting for weather? Because that's a huge thing, right? We have a lot of applications that we do that are for clients who have either been affected by huge storms, by hurricanes, by wildfires, and it's a consideration, especially if government's going to be investing a large amount of money. How are you making sure that's not going to waste, right? Are you going to put aerial and tornado, valley, which I feel like it's tornado country now. Tornadoes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not really valley anymore.
It's always fire season. It's always tornado spots.
It's always hurricane season.
It's always hurricane season. There's no seasons anymore. But are you addressing that? And so I think that's kind of definitely they want to see how are you.
I think that probably goes to the point of why grant writing and folks like you guys are important, right? I think there's a nuance to like what you need to be thinking about. If you really, if a company or a community wants to get funding, you got to ask in the right way.